In the early 1960s, Britain was riding high on confidence. Small cars were no longer cheap compromises. They were the future. One machine ruled that future. The Mini. It was simple, clever and everywhere, and for most manufacturers, it set the rules. But not everyone followed them. At a time when front-engine, front-wheel drive was becoming the safe answer, the engineers at Rootes Group chose a different direction. They put the engine at the back, not for shock value, but because they believed it was better. What they created was small, light, and unusually advanced. A compact car built around an all-aluminum engine, independent suspension, and a level of engineering refinement had rarely seen in this class. Its name was the Hillman Imp for a brief moment. It looked like the car that could challenge the Mini on intelligence, not imitation a car that promised modern thinking, unexpected performance, and something uniquely British. But this story does not begin in London. It does not begin in Coventry. It begins hundreds of miles north in Scotland. By the late 1950s, Rootes was under pressure, sales were slipping. Rivals were moving faster, and the Mini had rewritten. The rulebook Rootes did not want a copy. They wanted a leap. Their inspiration came from racing and aviation thinking, lightweight construction, high revving efficiency, compact packaging. At the heart of the project was an aluminium engine derived from Coventry Climax designs. Originally built for pumps and competition cars, small, light, unusual. Paired with a rear engine layout and full independent suspension, it promised balance and traction that most small cars could not match. On paper, it was brilliant to build it. Rootes made another bold choice. They would construct an entirely new factory, not in England, but near Glasgow. The plant at Linwood was meant to bring jobs pride and modern industry to a region still recovering from industrial decline. When the first cars rolled off the line in 1963, politicians watched. Cameras rolled, headlines spoke of progress. The Hillman Imp was not just a new car, it was a national statement. What few realized was that this decision, more than the car itself, would shape everything that followed technically. The Hillman Imp was ahead of its time. Its 875cc, our aluminum engine, was light, smooth and eager to rev, not powerful on paper, but willing. The kind of engine that rewarded drivers who understood momentum instead of brute force. With the weight over the rear wheels, traction was excellent. Independent suspension at all four corners gave the Imp balance most small cars simply did not have. Rack and pinion steering made it precise, direct and surprisingly confident on narrow roads. Motoring journalists noticed immediately. They described it as refined, comfortable, a small car for people who cared about engineering. Not just price. On specification alone, it looked like a smarter answer than the Mini. But engineering does not live on paper. It lives on assembly lines. And that is where the problems began. The Linwood factory was new. The workforce was committed, proud, and eager. But they were learning complex car assembly from scratch. At the same time, most of Rootes suppliers were still based hundreds of miles. South in England, parts arrived late, components arrived inconsistent. Quality checks were rushed to keep production moving. The Imp's advanced design made it less forgiving than simpler rivals. Tight tolerances meant small mistakes became visible failures. Early cars suffered from overheating. Poor carburation, coolant leaks, electrical gremlins. None of these issues were fatal on their own, but together they damaged trust to buyers. The distinction between design floor and production floor did not matter. A new car was expected to work, and the Imp too often did not. At first, Rootes responded with confidence. Marketing leaned hard into intelligence and innovation. Advertisements called it the car that thinks for itself. Features like an automatic choke-heated rear window and clever engine access were highlighted as signs of modern thinking. For a while it worked. Young families liked its practicality. Students liked its character. Export markets responded well. Variants expanded the lineup. Sportier versions sharpened the image. On the road, many owners loved how it drove, but reliability stories spread faster than improvements. Warranty claims climbed. Dealers struggled to keep customers satisfied. The same engineering that made the IMP special made it expensive to fix when things went wrong. By the mid-1960s, Roots was under strain. The car that was meant to secure the company's future was now draining its resources, and the industry around it was changing fast. By 1967, the pressure became too much. Control of Roots passed to Chrysler. For the workforce in Scotland, it felt like a lifeline. For engineers who believed in the IMP, it felt like uncertainty. Chrysler did not see romance in clever aluminum engines. They saw cost. They did not want experiments. They wanted efficiency, scale, and predictability. And that shift would quietly seal the Imp's fate. Under new ownership, priorities changed. The IMP had been created in an era when British manufacturers still believed innovation could win loyalty on its own. Chrysler did not share that belief. They saw a small car that was expensive to build, complicated to maintain, and already carrying a damaged reputation. Against it stood the Mini, cheaper, simpler, proven. From a balance sheet perspective, the decision was easy. Investment in the IMP slowed. Engineering updates were limited. Long-term development plans quietly disappeared. Instead, Chrysler focused on more conventional models. Cars that fit their global manufacturing logic. Cars that could be built cheaply in volume with fewer surprises. The IMP was allowed to continue, but it was no longer allowed to evolve. Sales reflected that reality. Even as build quality improved, the damage was already done. Public memory lingered on early failures, not later fixes. To many buyers, the IMP became a risk. To Chrysler, it became a holdover from another philosophy. Yet, something interesting happened as its mainstream appeal faded. The people who truly understood the car began to hold on to it. Drivers who valued balance over straight-line speed. Owners who appreciated a rever-happy engine, instead of effortless torque enthusiasts, who saw past reputation and focused on how it felt on the road. The IMP was never dull, even in decline. It remained engaging, and nowhere was that clearer than away from the showroom in motorsport. The same qualities that caused headaches on the production line became strengths. Lightweight mattered, rear traction mattered, balance mattered. Club racers and tuners discovered how much potential was hidden. Inside that small aluminum engine, power outputs doubled. Handling sharpened on narrow rally stages and tight circuits. The IMP embarrassed larger, more powerful cars. Its most famous success came in 1965, when Rosemary Smith took a work sim to victory on the Tulip Rally, a result that proved the concept had always been sound. The problem had never been the idea, it had been execution. By the early 1970s, time caught up with the IMP. New emissions rules arrived. Safety expectations changed. Competitors modernized. The IMP received minor updates, new names, small refinements, but the world it was built for no longer existed. In 1976, after more than 400,000 cars, production ended. The Linwood plant closed soon after. Scotland's brief chapter as a car-building nation came to an end. The Hillman Imp is easy to misunderstand. It is often remembered as a failure, a car that tried too hard, a lesson in what not to do, but that view misses something important. the IMP was not poorly conceived. It was ahead of its system. Its engineers believed intelligence could beat convention, that lightness could replace brute force, that small cars could be genuinely sophisticated. They were not wrong. They were simply working inside an industry that was not ready to support that thinking. At scale today, the IMP survives not as a forgotten footnote, but as a reminder of what happens when ambition outruns infrastructure, of how innovation needs stability to survive, and for those who drive one now carefully maintained and properly understood. The truth becomes clear. For a brief moment, Britain did build a rocket. It just launched from the wrong place at the wrong time. The Hillman IMP never became the car Britain needed it to be. Not because the idea was wrong, not because the engineers failed, but because timing, politics, and industry realities moved faster than vision. In another world with steadier production and fewer compromises, the IMP might have rewritten the small car story entirely instead. It became something quieter, a car, remembered by those who drove it properly, a machine that rewarded care, understanding, and patience. Today, when you see one still running, still revving, still cornering with confidence, it tells you something important. Innovation does not always win, but it always leaves a trace. And sometimes that trace is enough to earn a place in history for a brief moment. Britain really did build a rocket,